All right, Madison and Tyler, I'm very excited to talk to you guys for many reasons, including the fact that you guys got into franchising so young.
Mm-hmm.
But let's start with, what is your franchise story? Because I think it starts with parents. So I would love to hear kind of your guys' background story. How did you even fall into franchising?
Yeah, so my dad has been in franchising for the last 20 years. I've seen how, franchising, beneficial franchising can be when starting a business, especially like you said, so young, just starting out. We had that, or I was in corporate America for about 5 years, and at that point realized, maybe there's something else out there. We had 2 kids. We were sending them to daycare every day. And then we kind of started looking into what it looked like to start a business. And, as you do when you have great people around you, as you ask for advice. And the biggest piece of advice is, when you're going to start a business, maybe go the franchise route. And that's kind of how we fell into franchising.
Okay, so before we'll dive into growing up in franchise in a second, but I'm always curious. I mean, 5 years in corporate America, you obviously had this foundation. You knew what it was like, Madison, to grow up in a franchise family, so you could watch what that felt like, entrepreneurial. You're both in these corporate careers. Is it just that something's snagging, like grabbing you on the other side to say, like, why are you doing this when you know a different pathway? Like, what are those conversations like between the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, you leave your kids every day, right? And you're like, okay, I'm going to work for someone else. I put in the hours for someone else. I go and travel for someone else. When you realize, like, I could be putting the same effort into something that I could be building for my family, for my kids' future, to also be able to be spending more time with my kids and more time with my family. So I think that's where, you show up to the office every day and you're like, well, if I put this much effort into something that I'm creating, then you can create something that lasts and is beneficial to your family for years to come.
Yeah, and we're also very fortunate that we previously both had pretty solid corporate careers. I still work my corporate job. Like, there's a lot of benefits to that. It's very stable, it's very predictable, and it kind of gives us the freedom to, try to start something on our own where we know that we probably won't be cash flow positive for a decent amount of time. And for me, it was a conversation about, like, okay, we could be, saving her paycheck from her corporate job week over week. And then where does that put us in 5 years, compared to where are we in 5 years if we just kind of sacrifice that paycheck and instead look toward trying to build something on our own. Which has been especially handy in our case, where we're trying to start 2 daycares at once instead of just one. So, yeah.
If you guys don't have Madison's family story here, are you like, does that create some comfort in making this very big decision, or like what is that?
Yeah. So, growing up, my grandfather started a veterinary practice. My father had a truck brokerage company. Neither of those were franchises. They were both, true startups. Um, and their story does look different from Madison's story. So it's like, what you're going to see with franchising is, or my understanding is, like, it's maybe slower growth, but it's more of a guaranteed thing. Of course, nothing's ever a guarantee, but this did feel like a safer route. And having, like, her family involved, though, is nice because they do have a tremendous amount of experience. And you mentioned earlier that we're pretty young. As a younger person, like, imposter syndrome can be a very real thing. And so having someone who's, like, been in franchising for a long time and has kind of seen how businesses grow and develop, to, like, run ideas past and to say, like, oh yeah, no, you are thinking about the right way. It's tremendously beneficial for us to actually be able to act. So yeah, I do think our story looks considerably different if Madison's family wasn't in franchising.
Well, you're both coming from entrepreneurial backgrounds, and I'm fascinated by it. My kids are going through the same thing. Like, what are they watching mom and dad go through in owning a business, and then in the back of their minds, are they thinking, do I build a career, or how long do I build a career until I build something that I own, if I want to afford the lifestyle that I want to create for myself? And some people are perfectly fine in a career. Some people have higher ambitions. And so like when I started our company, I was 27. I was 5 years out of college when I took the risk, but I didn't grow up with parents who were entrepreneurs. And so I think that the biggest stall out for anybody making a decision to become a franchise owner ends up being they get up to that edge and they might have like these knee-jerk reaction, like, yeah, I would like to do this, but stability, but health insurance, but like all the buts keep on preventing it, versus you guys, like both of you got to see people that got to the edge and jumped off and said, we're gonna do this for our family. So that's where, I'm intrigued by like what's going on through your guys' brains as you're growing up in this, and at some point you say, yeah, great, I got my college education, I'm in a corporate career, but how do we build something bigger for our family? Because we've seen it before, right? Any comments on that, on whatever?
I mean, I guess just a couple of like things that brings up. One, I think Madison and I always kind of pictured her being a stay-at-home mom at some point. We have said ever since we started dating back when we were 16, like coming from entrepreneurial families, we do see where sometimes like work can get in the way of family development, and we have always been like, that's not a sacrifice that we are willing to make. And so we started structuring our lives assuming that Madison was going to be a stay-at-home mom, which means that like we are set up to be able to afford to live on our own income, which is part of what allowed us to take the risk of like jumping in and trying to take on something like this. Whereas like, you talk about, how do you afford the kind of lifestyle that you want? The reality is that for the lifestyle that a lot of 28-year-olds want, it takes two incomes to afford that. And so I think the fact that we were already used to making some like lifestyle sacrifices in favor of financial stability is really what allowed us to make that jump.
Were there any moments as you're approaching the decision point where the two of you are like, should we not do this? Like, did you have any like fear at the end of making the decision to say yes?
I mean, a tremendous amount of fear, obviously. And I don't know how familiar you are with the story of how we actually got into this, but we started, looking at different franchises, and it just so happened that we talked to Children's Lighthouse at the same time that there were two lighthouses coming onto the market in Kansas City, but we had to act fast. So we very much had to make a snap decision and then kind of evaluate after the fact whether or not it was the right decision. And, we feel like it was, but it wasn't necessarily a guaranteed. So yeah, I mean, very fearful, it was a leap of faith in every sense of the word.
Well, if I take I've done hundreds and hundreds of franchisee interviews, and if I take those, I'm just going to say over the age of 60, the ones that I've interviewed, I say, not regret, but what would you have done differently? And it's always, I would have done this earlier. And there was a million things that got in the way. And so the blessing here is the pressure decision that we have two on the market. Are you going to buy this? Yes or no? Probably helps. It almost helps you forget about some of the fears, because you have to make a decision like this. This is leap point. So,
well, and right, like there's a tremendous amount of risk in starting a business, right? But the way we see it, there was also a tremendous amount of risk that we get to where we're 40 years old, 45 years old. And not that that's old by any stretch of the imagination, but at that point in time, our first kid will already be out of the house. And then it will have been too late to really start pushing ourselves upward. And so even though like maybe that feels like the safer bet when we think about like what our goals are for our family and the time we want to spend together, like, believe it or not, starting a business almost is the safe decision, Yeah,
and so many people don't make that decision. Again, the million reasons not to is what prevents that. So, okay, so you guys obviously make the decision that franchising is of interest. Talk about your process of we've decided we're interested into this, so now we're going to start exploring franchising. How did you go about finding the right fit?
Yeah. So I started looking into starting a business about a year prior to us finding, children's lighthouses. And originally I was going to start a business from scratch. We were looking primarily in the home services industry. I talked with, her dad and additional, some other people that I look up to, just about what advice do you have? Does it feel like I'm thinking through this the right way? Here are the ideas that I've got, help me think through the upsides and the downsides of this. And one thing that her dad told me is, he was like, have you ever looked at the failure rate of startups? And I was like, well, no, I'm obviously not going to fail. Right. And he was like, well, the vast majority of people do, they don't fail immediately. They fail after 3 or 5 years. And he was like, have you ever looked at franchising? And I was like, well, franchising, doesn't tend to be in, there's not that many interesting franchises, the whole idea is that they're tried and true business models. You're just going to execute on something. And he was like, his advice to me was, you don't really want to be trying to learn how to run a business and also trying to learn an industry at the same time. He's like, right now, you don't really have experience in either one of those things. And I was like, well, I can't fight you there. So then I started looking at franchises, in the home services, area, and very quickly found that, these franchising companies are companies in their own right, and you are their customer, and so I started feeling like I was in maybe a little bit out of my depth, talking to people who knew a lot more than I knew about these things. And that's where I started, calling her dad in to kind of help me vet some of these guys. And frankly, he really saw through a lot of the stuff that I was being sold on, and I probably would have been convinced by, and I probably would have put real money behind. I'm obviously extremely grateful that he was willing to do that, and grateful that I was willing to kind of put my pride aside for a second and say, hey, I need some help here. And then, kind of in the background of this happening, Madison and I were complaining about how much we were spending on childcare and how we couldn't find childcare. And so we eventually found ourselves on a call with a couple of daycares, So
keep down that path. And I still want to unpack the home service to vastly different investments. But you're now looking at the childcare segment. You've learned a little bit, I'm sure at this point, listening to advice, going through yourself, to put a little bit more of a guard up, cut the cards first, so that you're aligning culturally in the business model versus being sold a franchise. So now you're talking to these brands in the category. Do you even know that Children's Lighthouse exists at this point? Or are you looking at some of the bigger ones? How did you go through that process?
Yeah, I mean, we knew of the Children's Lighthouse brand because we knew of its reputation in the area.
Yeah.
But definitely, I honestly at first didn't take the daycare idea seriously because we're pretty risk averse, I'd say. So the home industry, home services field seemed like smaller investment, smaller risk, and that's where I think we got a push from my dad of risk a little bit more, go out of your comfort zone a little bit. When it became evident that I would probably be running the day-to-day of whatever we did, it's we would have had to find childcare anyway. So why not put those two together, business ownership and motherhood, and I get to be around my kids. So we started looking into, the premium daycare field. And I didn't even attend the discovery day, to be honest with you, because I was like, oh, we're not doing this.
Yeah. So I called her on a Wednesday and said, hey, I'm going to Texas on Friday to meet with the corporate of this company that I don't even know that she was aware that we had talked to at that point.
Yeah. So it was kind of like we said, a fast decision that we're glad that we had the opportunity to make. But I think the Children's Lighthouse, we have the opportunity to kind of make our name in the area, because it's a lot smaller than a lot of the other premium brands in our area, like the footprint is. And so we saw that as an opportunity to be able to bring the true Children's Lighthouse brand and curriculum to our area. And we've seen like the benefits, that our kids have gotten from premium childcare. So wanted to make sure that the Kansas City area could see that as well.
Yeah, and I guess just kind of
Go ahead, Tyler.
Just kind of talking about the risk differential between like home services and childcare, because obviously like the investment is vastly larger, but when we're looking at home services, we're primarily looking at like home-based, like home services companies kind of going just straight out of pocket, not financing these things. And our thought there was like, look, we're young enough that we can recover from a bad decision in this space. The thing that kind of like turned me out to that though is you start looking at, what's the potential upside of these home services, like they have these success stories like, oh, this guy is now making $95,000 a year. I'm like, that's not what I'm risking this for. Like, I know what entrepreneurship is about, and it's about sacrifice, and that's not something I'm willing to make a sacrifice for. So we looked at the risk differential as, the difference between falling 1,000 feet and falling 10,000 feet, which is, it doesn't matter. You're dead when you hit the ground anyway. So you may as well go big,
Yeah, I mean, it's such it's such a drastic shift no matter what. But if you're looking at upside, I mean, and I think there's obviously plenty of people that get into the home service network. The amount of potential wealth that you can build in there is going to be limited, because it's really a man in a van type business. And unless you figure out how to scale yourself, which most can't, because for them to give up their salary to even like to make a little bit of money per unit as they scale it, it's hard for them to get beyond, okay, I need to have my income replacement. Versus in the category that you're in, there's multiple turns on the investment if you do it right. And obviously you're looking at Kansas City that has still room to grow should you want to continue to scale business. Did you go to other discovery days? Is there anything that helped you say no, like something that turned you off either culturally or something that happened in the sales process?
Yeah. So, we did talk to a couple of other like premium childcare providers. I won't necessarily call them out specifically here. But the big thing with Children's Lighthouse that we liked is their approach to curriculum and this idea of we want to get kids prepared for what they're going to learn in kindergarten and how they're going to learn in kindergarten versus we're going to teach them everything they're going to learn in kindergarten. And, I think that like social and emotional development is really something that gets neglected in a lot of childcare centers. And so it's neat to be associated with a brand that recognizes the importance of that, and that gets reflected in their curriculum. And again, there was an opportunity where there was 2 units for sale by someone who clearly, wanted out of the industry for one reason or another. And it was just kind of like the intersection of there's a unique opportunity and we were prepared to take it. And
I think there's also something to say about like the home office corporate team. Like they're a great team. Mm-hmm. They're kind. They're down to earth. They've been so helpful through this process. Like we knew we were coming in with, no childcare experience outside of, being the overprotective mom that did look up like the licensing regulations, like when I sent my own kid to daycare. Right. But, they've been like tremendously helpful, like in easing us in, or I'd say easing. It's not really easing because we kind of jumped in with 2 feet, but, helping us navigate like this world as we have taken over these 2 existing facilities. So I think having that support and going in knowing that we'd need strong support, it was extremely evident that team, was going to be able to provide that.
Yeah. And I mean, frankly, it's something I wish I would have looked out more for whenever we were talking to different companies, is trying to find a company that we were confident was going to support us. I think we got very lucky with Children's Lighthouse, because I think Madison and I both thought that this was going to be a more turnkey experience than it like turned out to be. And so like it's unbelievable to me that these guys have, 70 some odd schools that they're looking after, and yet we still get the level of attention and service that we do. And so, yeah, I mean, we feel extremely blessed that's been our experience.
This is a big word, but lucky is the word, because like, look, there's arguably 4,000 different franchise opportunities. If I took the 4,000 and said, how many of them sell franchises and how many of them develop franchisees, the selling of the franchises, let's say that takes out 3,500 of them. So that leaves 500 brands that want to develop real franchisees. And then in your category, and things that as an outsider, you're not going to be able to have all the insight to. But for me, I love that it's family owned still, where private equity has jumped in really big into this category, because it can be such a cash cow. And so here you have family run, family morals and values, and you can see that obviously once you get to Discovery Day. But before that, it's nearly impossible to say, like, how could this culture be a culture of supporting me versus another one that probably, like everybody in the premium childcare space, they're all good at support, but there's a different level, I think, when you're looking at a children's lighthouse in this scenario for all the opportunities that exist. And again, like, you guys have Tyler, you're the entrepreneurial side on your side, Madison, the franchisee side on your side, and then the collective using that to help make the decision, then obviously seeing it in real life and now experiencing it to have a fantastic journey. But not everybody gets to go through that. Some people would put Children's Lighthouse and say it's just another franchise,
Yeah, and I mean, lucky is the right word, but the nice thing about luck is that you only need to get lucky once, So,
and a lot of hard work.
Yeah,
a lot of hard work. It doesn't dismiss the hard work. So, obviously, like, different scenario. You jump in, you buy the units. Most that get into this space sign the franchise agreement, go on a journey to find the land, sign the lease, or build, and that could be a long-term thing. So there's plenty of time to prep up for this moment. Have you had time, the two of you, to discuss where the dream goes next, or are you so stuck in the moment that you're not even thinking about where the dream could go?
I mean, to stay sane, you've got to keep the dream in focus, right? It's like, we of course want more schools, and whenever we talk about what our ideal situation is, we think like 6 to 8 is achievable. We've only really been operating these facilities for 3 months now, and every day we learn more about the industry and more about our local market and more about what's possible here. And so, whether that's 6 to 8 facilities in the Kansas City market, or if they're a little bit more geographically dispersed, I don't think we know the answer to that yet. But no, we're certainly not done at 2.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've been gypped out of that opportunity of finding land, right? And so we have to at least do it one more time so we can see it built from the ground up,
Yeah. And I mean, that is one of the things that's even more like unique about this opportunity that we have. Like you pointed out, like, we started doing this pretty young, like we're both 28. But if we were going to build a facility, we would have had to have gotten into this when we were like 25, 26. So it's like, it is in some ways, it's unfortunate that we didn't have that opportunity to like explore the market and learn and do the big run up and the big grand opening and all the like fun that comes with that. But on the other hand, like, it does feel like we kind of got to like just leapfrog into a more advanced stage of, facility ownership than may have otherwise been possible.
I mean, what's fascinating to me. I mean, I not lucky. I had the right pushes to make me make the decision at 27 to jump into business, which that is, I had to get lucky once to make the decision to do this as well. But if I look at the best franchise stories or the best business stories, it is someone that tasted corporate America, saw what they liked and didn't like, wanted corporate America to win for them, meaning like, take me on a journey, lift me up to the top, or make it so that I don't ever have to start a business. Most don't catch the entrepreneur before they catch you. And so you look at this, but on the flip side, for being in your 20s and getting into this category, you have to have a support mechanism around you because the investment is so large. So even though like hustle and grit, you have all those tools, majority of people that are in their mid to late 20s aren't going to have the risk tolerance or the financial means to be able to make that jump. And so you flash forward, now I'm going to sound like the old guy because I'm turning 45 this year, but I have a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, a great business, but it's skyrocketed. It went so fast. And so that's why I asked about that dreaming part, because at the beginning of your opening statement, you guys are saying like 5 years from now, what does it look like? Hold true to that, whether it's with Children's Lighthouse or another brand, because it's going to go so quickly. And you're going to get to that point. You're going to say, did I do what I want to do? Now, for us, we've checked so many boxes, but it's going to go so fast. So keep that as your North Star as you go through this journey. What does Tyler, your father-in-law, Madison, your dad say about all this?
I mean, I think we're still in the throes of it. Like Tyler said, we took over 3 months ago. We've done a lot in that 3 months. Now we're just to the point of being able to breathe and kind of work on the business instead of, just rapid fire, get things done. I think, there's still a lot of work to do, especially in this area. Like we said, I mean, one of the facilities we're still really just trying to push enrollment, since we had the opportunity to like remodel and kind of rebrand. So I think right now we're really still, in that ramp up phase, and we're not quite to the place that we can, take a step back and kind of reflect quite yet.
Yeah. And kind of to that end, so one of the facilities, we got to start with an empty building, and Madison mentioned, like, we remodeled it and we had a quick launch, and we opened with like 6 kids, like nothing in daycare world. But then the other facility we took over while it was still operating.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, like, you're familiar, the process of taking a business that already exists, it's got a staff of 20, 25 people, you got 130, 140 kids in there, and making that your own is completely different from the process of starting one from scratch. And so it is interesting where, like, Madison kind of has more of a lead role in one facility. I have more of a lead role in the other facility. And it feels like we have 2 completely different jobs, so it has been interesting for sure.
Out of curiosity, I mean, because I went through this, and this is going to be a weird statement, but when I started the business, I wanted more gray hair. Now I cut it so thin on the side, so I have no gray hair. But it was more so because I knew that I could impact, but I was trying to gain respect of others, of being younger in business. And like, I felt like a need that I need to be older, but I didn't want it to, like, it's such a weird snag because I don't want to get old fast, but I needed that. I felt like I needed gray hair and I would be respected more. Do you guys feel like, has that been a part of your journey, is trying to show, like, give us respect, look what we've done?
I think, yes, sometimes I think I had that kind of feeling in corporate America as well. I did, quite frankly, climb the ladder a lot faster than others. I was at a point that I looked around and I was significantly younger than, people on my same level, like, before I left corporate America. So I think, like, my whole career has been like trying to look older and act older and like prove that, just because I'm young doesn't mean, that I'm not just as, like, capable as a lot of other people. I mean, I think at this point in the daycare industry, like, since we are so new in the industry, it's really just like learning as fast as we can. But yeah, I definitely feel that sentiment of, like, feeling like you need to prove yourself, especially being younger in the business ownership space.
Yeah, and I mean, for my day job, most of it is managing up and working with our higher level leaders. And of course, I work for a multi-billion-dollar company, so these guys are the real deal. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to, like, work with them directly and interact with them and understand, like, how they see things, which I think did give me a lot of confidence in coming into a facility and understanding, like, here are some things that need to be done. Here are some core tenets of running a business. Here's how you make sure everyone's focused on the right thing. And I found that, like, approaching that situation with confidence and with assertiveness and with decisiveness really remedied any concerns that people may or may not have had about my age pretty quickly. We've also been highly, highly intentional about like the leaders that we're hiring and putting in these facilities, because, you know, part of the dream here is not necessarily that we are in a daycare building every day.
Right.
You know, it's the dream is to get leadership teams in place who are like strategic thinkers and who are good leaders, who can run the facilities in our stead and develop those people. And so part of what we look for as we talk to these people, you know, are people who don't necessarily have concerns with our age or perceived experience level. So yeah, I wouldn't say that's been a huge problem for us.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, you guys have excellent heads on your shoulders. You're going to keep building this up. Again, it's going to go fast. You'll look back in 15 years from now and say, what just happened? Make sure that you take the time to breathe and have fun, pinch yourself. Obviously, you guys have a good North Star with what you're doing with your family and being around your kids. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm grateful that you gave me some of your time.
Oh,
Yeah,
for sure.
Thanks for having us.
Love it. Yeah. For Madison and Tyler, I'm Nick. This was another episode of Meet the Z. Take care.